Hey guys, welcome to the Real Hacker Hours podcast. This is basically where I just do the normal project work that I typically do. I just hit the record button before I do it. Just none of this is really planned, it's just the raw work of me doing it, so you will see a lot of smooth brain mistakes. Right now, continuing the fuzzer development from the previous videos. The current stage of where it is I've implemented all of the RFC specific logic, so it should be able to emulate effectively an FTP client and effectively communicate in accordance with the FTP RFC to a server. That being said, I also, with that, I mean like the base FTP RFC logic and some of the extensions, since with FTP there's a ton of different extensions that you don't always see across all the servers. So what's next? Basically TLDR, it can correctly emulate a client. Right now, what I'm worried about, well, the very next thing is effectively having it able to run continuously against the server and not just hang. Primary concern for that is due to incorrect RFC data or incorrect FTP data traveling across the wires, since we will be sending incorrect data when we corrupt the traffic. It can just drop our session. Our FTP um, fuzzer will have to notice, hey, they dropped my session. I need to reinitialize the connection so it can continue fuzzing. For that, first thing I'm going to do, this is a primary fuzzing function. I'm going to change this to a while true loop, so that way it runs infinitely. And I'm going to get rid of all these lines, so that way the get action function will just, well, what does this get action function do right now? Oh, I need to implement that logic isn't implemented. Basically, what this get action function is supposed to do is return a particular FTP action. Now, how I design this is I have various functions that will either execute an FTP command or what I call an action, which is a series of FTP commands, or which will do some sort of session-based logic, whether or not it's redirecting the file, which like directory I'm currently in, creating a file, stuff that from a fuzzer's perspective, it would be beneficial to keep track of. Okay, so I'm going to try running this now. Let's see what happens when you run it. Appears I have it. Stupid. Okay, that's just a stupid syntax error. Okay, continuously running that. Okay, so ideally what's going to happen is this get action function will get like a function that we can execute, and then we'll execute it. I'm going to do a quick Google search because I forget how to do like an indirect function call in Python or something like that. I'm going to pause the stream for a second. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this right here is how we do an indirect Python 3 function call. We effectively just return the function. By the way, which currently is just that function right there. That's the only one that I have that I can choose from. Returns it here, and then we just call it as a function. Now let's make sure that this is actually being ran. I'm going to do so by implementing just a print statement with this function. Let's do listening to some music right now. So okay, cool. Let's make sure that's being run. Yep, that function is being ran. Cool. So what is that? What did we just implement? We just effectively implemented a way for the FTP fuzzer to randomly choose different actions that we've determined, hey, this is something we want to like fuzz and just call upon it. Effectively just randomly indirectly calling Python 3 functions. What I'm going to do next is I'm just going to expand this actions list to include all of the FTP functions. Going to pause the stream again, so that's just going to be probably like a minute or two of just typing. Okay, so I'm back. Here is the list with all of the different functions representing different FTP actions that we can do. Now, looking at this, running it, we see that we have a few errors, so I'm just going to go through and try and fix some of them. 7, 8, let's check out that error. Oh, probably just renamed this function, this variable in the function without running it after that accidentally. Could not transfer data. Let's see what's up with that. Okay, so what I did when I was developing the RFC specific functionality is, since at that time I was very concerned with getting it right and I was only testing it at a single time, I wasn't really worried about having, what's the right word, robustness in case if I send invalid data and it drops it. So I just basically had it that if it could not transfer data, just kill the program. However, I'm going to need to change that now. First off, since running this repeatedly, okay, that's another issue I'm going to fix, but since running this repeatedly, we get that could not transfer data function. What I'm first going to do, pull up Wireshark and just confirm that it's not just like crashing on the first function that it runs, that it actually is able to send a ton of data. Back. Okay, could not transfer data. Let's filter up FTP. Okay, cool. So here the issue is able to send valid FTP data. For some reason, this stru command is bad, and it cannot transfer. So because of the FTP server thinks this stru command is bad, it does not actually initiate the data transfer, but the FTP fuzzer, at least the one I have made here, it assumes that it's valid and the server is waiting, so it attempts to send send data. And since it's not, this transfer cannot execute, so which is the reason why it's doing this. Now, what I'm going to do about that, I plan on implementing effectively a part of the FTP fuzzer data structure. I have a field called like failed columns, and every time that it fails to send data that it expects to either send or receive, it will increment this value by 1 and then check is this past some threshold, and if it is, just reinitialize the connection. So let's just grab this, go down transfer, let's just do, actually there's a function called like check connection. I can just implement this here, plus equals 1. So we can just call this function. Basically what this does, how I plan on reinitializing the connection is as a variable called connection established, false for no, true if there is one. And for each loop of the fuzzing function, it checks, is there a connection established? There is. Okay, oh, there isn't, go ahead and initialize 1. So let's get back to the self-done. Cool, so let's try this now. Cannot receive data. Okay, so this one's a bit tricky since for sending data, we can realistically just like attempt to send data, fail. Okay, cool. Just return nothing and move on. Since by sending data, we aren't looking for data. When we're receiving data, on the other hand, we're actually looking to return data to it that we just simply do not have. So we're going to have to implement some logic, probably like return none, and then whenever we receive messages call, we just check if it's none. So cool. Let's set that up. Return none. And let's check where is this called. Self done. Return. So send. Okay, so this is effectively send command will wrap for this. So this is going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be caught in a lot of places. Actually, what we can do is we can do pass. Let's get rid of this since when I wrote that line of code, I was expecting to have some functionality where when it prints out the current directory, we could actually like parse it out. But I decided for certain reasons not to have that, so I can just delete that since that's not being used. And I can also delete that since when I was writing the xpwd code, I basically just copied the pwd since they're effectively the same function, which leaves us with here. So there's only two spots in which we're actually looking to receive data, and it makes sense because this right here is for setting up passive data transfers, which in order to do that, we need to read data sent from the server. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have if passv output is none, return none. None, we need two nuns because it's expecting to. If e passive output is none, return none. Set up data transfer. Where is this called? Self done. If rest data socket is none, return data socket. If data socket is none, return. 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 If data socket is none. Actually, one thing I'm noticing, well, okay, yeah. I thought for a second, because looking at all of the functions where a set up data transfer is called from, they don't return really anything. Like, looking at the return statements, like right there, they're not returning any particular data values. So, what that means is what I was thinking of doing is just implementing a check in the functions that take these two values to just check if they're none. But I'm probably just going to stick with having a check directly after the function call for return none, just in case if I decide later on to implement some functionality that uses those values, that could cause problems. So cool. Let's see, probably had a typo somewhere. It's running. Max failed comms is not defined. I forgot to define that enum. So let's go up here, add another constant, equals, let's say, 20. Okay, another error here. Line 1061. So, it's complaining that one of these is none. File perms, and so it's these two function calls. One of them is returning something none. Let's take a look at these two functions to see which of them could be it. Def get file, return none none. Looking at this, probably get file, generate file, permissions. Yeah, this is always going to return a value, so it's definitely get file. So what are we going to do about that? I'm going to go down here, and we're going to implement a check. If file is none, return. Let's try running it for a few seconds. Does not appear to be crashing. Let's take a look at the FTP traffic here. So they are coming through, but rather slowly. I think that could be an issue with the, what is it, the socket timeouts I have set with it waiting for a certain duration. Probably won't fix that. Hang on a second.